Welcome, Jet fans, to another episode of the Jets Life podcast. It's official. As of the last 48 hours, the Jets have hired Aaron Glenn to be the new head coach for the New York Jets. A hire that's very exciting. One, obviously, going into the offseason wasn't the name that's on the top of everyone's list. That name was Mike Vrabel. I think a lot of Jet fans, their wish list included somebody with potential experience, somebody with an offensive background. And when you start going down the list, Vrabel was really at the top of everyone's list. I never really viewed that as a realistic option. I figured he'd go elsewhere, especially with his history with New England. And then once that New England job opened up, things got obviously moving a little quicker. But in all honesty, I mean, you look down the list of other experienced candidates, and not much really kind of you know, left us saying that guy needs to be the hire. And the Jets did interview some. Matt Nagy from Kansas City got interviewed. Ron Rivera got interviewed. Just wasn't enough for the Jets to kind of move in that direction. They continue that trend of getting a first time coordinator to lead the team, but I feel like this is going to be different. There's something in my mind that just makes this feel a little bit different. The last few times it was somebody who came in without much knowledge of the situation, believing that they had the opportunity to turn something around that many others tried before them and have failed at. Really, over the last 14 years, it's been a consistent missing of the playoffs, and just not enough winning has been a major problem. Aaron Glenn comes in, and he's a guy that you have to root for. It just, if you're a Jet fan and you are not rooting for this guy, I don't know what you're doing. This is a guy who really started from the bottom and worked his way up. Came in as a draft pick, 12th overall by the Jets. Was here through the hard times. Made it through a 1-15 season. Came here. Was here under Parcells. uh, Undersized corner that typically Bill Parcells does not, incorporate into his defenses. And he had enough in him that Parcells stood by him. And if you haven't watched it, and I'll reference it a few times here, I went through Aaron Glenn's interview on the Pivot, which is a podcast. Um, a lot of good takes in there, a lot of good stories. And one of the stories he talks about is exactly what I'm referencing. Um, Parcells came in, and there was numerous reports going around, as there usually is when a new head coach, new GM comes in. It's who's getting traded, who's getting cut, so on and so forth. We're talking about now with Aaron Rodgers and whether or not he'll be here with the new regime as things continue. It's a constant cycle. When you change your leadership at the top, things will happen. Aaron Glenn went to Bill Parcells' office, conversated with Parcells, basically saying, like, I'm hearing from others, you're going to cut me, you're going to trade me, whatever trade me really was what the case was. Parcells sat him down and said, everybody has a price. And Aaron Glenn, being the professional that he is, understood that and took that as a wake up call. Ended up winning multiple All Pros, and really, I mean, again, one of the greats at the position for the Jets, and someone you have to root for. It's just the way it is. Um, I'm with you, Jeff fans. I wanted somebody with experience. I wanted somebody with an offensive background, but who out there really fit that mold when you got past Mike Vrabel, who mind you was on the defense side of the ball as well. There was really nobody out there that really fit all those characteristics. Liam Cohn was a guy I was very high on. I wanted the Jets to kind of pursue that avenue and maybe potentially pair him with Mike Greenberg, who's the general manager for the Buccaneers. They never interviewed him. I'm surprised with the number of candidates that they interviewed not being enough on the offense side of the ball. But something you have to understand too is when you're an offensive coordinator trending towards being a head coach, you know, the way you're going to make your move is if there's a quarterback there that you can put park your bus behind and trust that you're going to be able to continue to progress. And the Jets don't really have that at the moment. They have Aaron Rodgers and a major question mark on one, whether or not he'll even be here, and two, how long will he be here for? If they decide to move forward with him, which I trend to believe that won't be the case. Um, but all steps aside here, I'm excited about the hire for Aaron Glenn. I'm going to go through a few of his quotes on the Pivot podcast, and just reasons why I believe that this is going to go the right direction. I mean, here's a guy like I mentioned earlier, a guy that started from square one, was a draft pick for the Jets, went through a terrible season, worked on the Parcells, made all pros to the point where when the expansion draft happened, Houston had him be one of their primary selections, and he turned out to be one of the Texans' first All Pro players. Um, these are accolades that he has accomplished throughout his career, and it goes even further past that. It goes into his mark as an executive, head coach, whatever you want to go. He started off as a scout for the Jets, an internal scout, worked his way out into college scouting, and then went down the coaching bracket, and never really took it as a situation where he felt like he needed to be put above anybody else. He earned every step of the way. He goes through the entire step process in that pivot. If you haven't watched it, um, just Google it. I'll put a link in the comments down below at the conclusion of this video. But fast forward about 20 minutes in, and it's a good 40 minutes of just life stories and experiences and what made him the guy he is today and why he believes he's going to be a great coach. And it's a really interesting story. It's a very, very good insight if you need that reassurance that this guy might be the right guy. I could be completely wrong. I've been wrong before. I was wrong on Salah. I projected Salah to be that culture changer, but the problem when you bring in a new coach, defense coordinator, offense coordinator, whatever it might be, is you're projecting what that guy was as a coordinator to be what they're going to become as a head coach. And with Salah, the thing that got a lot of us so excited about him was his ability to just, the fire. When defense would make a big play, he was all over the field. He was excited. He was pumped, and he was like that 24/7 when he was on the sideline, to the point where the 49ers had to hire a hold me back guy, someone that literally when Salah would be so pumped running on the field, this guy would be grabbing him by his shirt and pulling him back, making sure he didn't get on the field. I was excited with Salah when they actually brought that same hype guy or that pull me back guy onto the team. I thought this was going to be a very similar situation where he'd be what he was as a as a defense coordinator, as a head coach, but it became very, very quick, very fast that this guy just was not the same. Um, he just wasn't the same guy that you were seeing on Sundays in San Fran. He's going back there, might get it back. I know it's tough when you're a head coach because you have to be on the go like the entire time. You don't have that opportunity to be able to kind of really say like, okay, we got this. Um, you know, fourth down, let's get the punt team on the field. Defensive guys, I'll meet you halfway and we'll freaking walk out the field together and pump this thing up. Can't really do it as a head coach because fourth down comes along. You got to be ready to make a decision. You got to move quick. Every single play is a decision that has to be made. I think that's part of it. But with Aaron Glenn, it's not just that you're seeing on the sideline. You are seeing the pump, you are seeing the excitement, but you're seeing a guy who's just all business all the time. It just seems like a guy who just ready to you know make the right calls, make the right decisions. He's definitely somebody who's learned under some great tutelage. Worked under Parcells, obviously, I mentioned earlier. Worked under even Bill Belichick as a defensive backs coach specifically. So Bill Belichick was coaching him one on one during his time with the Jets. Eventually, moving over to the Cowboys with Parcells again, and even Todd Bowles was one of his coordinators. I know we have our opinions about Todd Bowles, but he seems to be doing something right in Tampa at the moment. Got two offensive coordinators promoted to head coaches in back-to-back years in Canales, and now, as a report yesterday, Liam Cohen is expected to take the Jaguars head coaching job. But Aaron Glenn has worked under greatness. Sean Payton with New Orleans for years, and now Dan Campbell. It's every stop he's gone, he's worked under a great head coaching, and he just seems like the guy that's going to be that next step. And I know I've mentioned it already, and I'm start going through some of his quotes. Um, Again, I talked about wanting an experienced hire, and the guy at the top of our list was Vrabel. And what I got to say at this point in time is screw him. Screw Mike Vrabel. His situation, coming to the Jets for an internal interview just to basically force the Patriots to play their hand, fire their coach, and screw the Patriots too. Screw them for their entire hiring process. Talk about a complete sham. Talk about complete disrespect to the Rooney Rule, which I don't 100% agree with what the Rooney Rule is. I agree with what it represents. I understand it represents the ability to give minority candidates an opportunity, but what the Patriots did is a blatant just ignorance, like complete slap in the face to what this rule represents. They bring in two guys off the streets that are minority candidates just to fill a quota. I am so proud for another reason of Aaron Glenn being our head coach for telling them, "F no, I'm not interviewing with you." That is a complete disgrace of the rule. And if this were the Jets, or really, I mean, majority of other teams, but if this were the Jets doing this, they would have gotten ripped to shreds. And there were some in the national media. I gotta give some respect out there. There were some in the national media that tried making this a point, and it just got like wiped under the rug, and, like as if they didn't just bring in two guys that were never going to get head coaching interviews that were minority candidates just for the sake of filling a quota. That is absolutely a disgrace. I just it bothers me so much. I hope this whole entire plan with Vrabel and this whole plan with Drake May blows up in their face. I don't think it will. I actually think Drake May is a pretty decent quarterback. I think he showed a lot of promise in his first year. We'll see what it turns into. Obviously, we've seen what Vrabel can do as a head coach. I think it's gonna work out for them, but I hope it friggin' blows up in their face because that is absolutely a disgrace, and the fact that nobody is talking about it nearly enough is just even more of a disgrace. Again, if this was the Jets, it would be a complete, it would be a complete talking point. Why do the Patriots feel that they can work their way around the rules just for the sake of getting their guy interviewed and hired immediately? It shows cowardice. It shows you were scared. It shows you ponied up just for the sake of getting this guy in there. When if the guy really wanted to be there, you could have played it right. You could have interviewed multiple candidates. Were you scared of finding someone better? Is that the problem? You're scared of finding someone better, and you didn't want to put yourself in a situation where you had to make a decision on whether or not it's Vrabel or somebody else. That's just cowardice. I hope they fail. I hope it blows up in their face. But for the Jets' sake, worked out. I do think it's something to be said about bringing in a guy who has experienced the good times and bad times with this franchise. 1 in 15 to an AFC Championship game appearance within a couple of seasons. That's obviously something that he carries with him, and he carries it well. He's understands what he is to his team, understands what he is to his fan base. But anyway, I am going to run through some of these quotes here. I did jot some down here from the Pivot podcast. Again, I'll put the podcast in my comments. Just got to run through a few things here. And I touched on one of these things here the last couple of moments. Um, One of the quotes that really stood out to me just because of that situation where he turned the Patriots down is, um, and I'm paraphrasing yet also kind of trying to read exact quotes here. The one thing I feel I can do better than anybody is know if someone's real or a fake. And again, that stood out to me pretty voluminous because what were the Patriots in a situation of a hiring cycle? The fact that they reached out to him, I think they were doing damage control because people started talking crap about their process. Because this was after the fact. I think they were just trying to make it seem like they were trying to go through it the right way and do things correctly. Um, but we're not oblivious. We're not blind. We understand what's going on. And so is Aaron Glenn. He spots a fake. He knew that they didn't want to interview. Um, didn't want to interview him. Um, made it basically clear. If you want me, if you think I'm the best guy for the job, bring me in. We'll talk and we'll win some games. That was another thing he said during that conference or during that interview, and that's going to happen. The exact quotes from him. I'm well again semi paraphrasing, but these are things he said. I mentioned that his coaching tree, who he's worked under as a player, as a coach as well, who he's developed under in his entire career, which included 15 years in the NFL, and now includes what 13 years, 14 years as a scout and coach combination, working under Parcells, Belichick, Sean Payton, Campbell, and again, I'm going to put Todd Bowles out there just because what he's doing in Tampa. Um, it's kind of impressive what he's turned out to be. I just don't think the Jets had the luxury of time to wait for Bowles to become this, but he's doing a pretty good job in Tampa at the moment. But Aaron Glenn's worked under these guys, and he kind of fits that mold. And where I think he differentiates from a lot of these guys, being like Todd Bowles, for example, who was here prior, I think he differentiates in the fact that he's Todd Bowles' personality in press conferences and to the media was not necessarily the greatest. And again, watch the Pivot podcast and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The guy when he speaks, he's very educated, very you know, sophisticated, very to the point, very I mean, when he speaks, he's the kind of guy you look at and say when he speaks, you're gonna listen. If you're not gonna listen, you're gonna be entertained. I was entertained for 40 minutes listening to this guy talk on the Pivot podcast. It was very entertaining. And they do a good job too, the guys on that podcast. But I was very entertaining hearing him speak about his life stories and his what it took for him to get to this point, and talking about his moment that he determined that he was going to be that he wanted to be a head coach or be a coach. Period. He talked about after he retired in 2008. For a few years there, he lived in Texas, in the Houston area, built up a couple of restaurants, more than a couple. I think it was like 8 restaurants. He said, and he was very successful, doing a great job. And the point where he realized things needed to change was conversation. He was watching a game on ESPN or whatever it was. I think he said, and the entire time he's bashing like what's going on. Why is he doing that? He needs to do this. Oh man, do this. Like just basically what we all do as fans. He was doing that, and to the point where his wife, just kind of said like, "What are you doing? Go out there, be a coach. I know you like the restaurant thing, but you seem passionate about what you're doing, go do it." And that was like, based on what he was saying, that was like the turning point for him. He got into coaching and again, worked his way up from really the bottom all the way up as an in-house scout to the scouting department as a college scout, um, trending over to coaching. And he didn't get a job right off the bat, DB coach. Let's get moving. He started even lower than that. He was a quality control guy. He was an assistant DB coach, got promoted to DB coach with the Saints. Finally got an opportunity when Campbell moved over to Detroit. He brought along Aaron Glenn with him, and Aaron Glenn as defense coordinator. What has he done with that defense? He's brought them from the worst in the NFL to seventh in the NFL. Um, all that with an injury riddled roster. His roster was down to nothing, and I understand we all play this game of looking at what have you done for me lately, and sometimes not really what have you done for me lately is what was the last thing you did, and the last thing he did was get destroyed from a defense standpoint to the Commanders in that last playoff game. I forget the final score. They got blown out. We all understand that. But the thing you got to kind of really kind of take out of that whole entire consideration is they've even during that game they lost corners. They were down to basically nothing. And let's not pretend like the guy he was going against in Jay and Daniels was some slouch. Jay and Daniels has proven this season to be a very efficient quarterback. Even as a rookie, he's as efficient, as a rookie as we've seen in a very, very long time. Just moves the ball in a positive direction. It seems like every single play, whether it be with his legs, with his arm, the ball moves forward every single time they take a snap. And that's what happened in this game. It was just, chunk plays after chunk plays. And when you are down to literally nothing, which is what Aaron Glenn's defense was down to, there's not much you can really do with your roster to really aid you in that direction. Like I said, he led into a seventh ranked defense, and with nothing, that says a lot for this guy. It means he works with what he has and gets the best out of his players, whether or not they are Pro Bowl caliber players or you know players who shouldn't even be on the field in some cases, and that was the case for him a little bit this year. Really down to scraps on the defense side of the ball. But with all that, got this team to the playoffs, and yeah, albeit backed a lot by what the offense was able to do. But I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that this guy was up there with. I mean, one of the top guys on the list left. Especially when you consider the fact that no offensive coordinators really interviewed with this team. Ben Johnson was not interviewing here. Anybody out there who believes Ben Johnson was going to come here, I mean, the moment his name got thrown out there, I shot it down right away. I said, this just is not going to happen. Not in this situation. Not in a situation where you have Rodgers for 1 year and then it's back to the drawing board with who's my quarterback going to be. That was never going to be the case with Ben Johnson. I just never ever saw it as a realistic option. It would have taken a lot of Woody Johnson's money to make that happen, and apparently that's what it took for Chicago. They're paying him reportedly $13 million a year. And I know there's a lot of weariness on how the coaching contracts kind of get presented out there and stuff like that. So whatever it might be, but nonetheless, I mean the Jets, you know, out of the candidates remaining, tell me a guy that you wanted outside of Aaron Glenn. Um, I don't know why they didn't interview Liam Cohen. I don't know the answer to that. He was a guy that I really would have liked for the Jets to at least bring in and see what happens. And I'll put that out there. I still trend to wanting an offensive minded guy. But at the end of the day, what the Jets needed was a true leader, somebody who you can get behind, someone who players get behind, and you're seeing it live here. There's former players super pumped for this guy, guys that played with him. You know, I understand it's kind of like normal circumstance. Oh, congratulations, proud of you, bro, whatever, so on and so forth. But sometimes it's more than that too. Sometimes it's the fact of these players and these former players and people around him. Bill Parcells went out of his way to give grace for to Aaron Glenn, and Bill Parcells retired, probably enjoying life right now. He doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to be out there and praise Aaron Glenn for getting an opportunity as a coach, but he went out there and did it. And that's the kind of guy Aaron Glenn is. Every person he talks to, every step along the way, people people get around this guy. They love this guy. And if you're a fan of this team, and when he was here, you're not excited about what could potentially be. I mean, if there's anybody to root for, why not root for a guy who was here through the dark times, worked his way up to a conference championship game, and hopefully will get us back to those days? I mean, this is what we all want. This is what, you know, I understand the Vrabel situation. I understand the experienced hire, but we've seen many cases where even that has failed. Ron Rivera out of Washington very, very quickly. A year later, Dan Quinn's there, and look what they're doing. They're in the conference championship game. Dan Quinn was an experienced hire, I understand that, but he was also one who got kicked out of town very quickly, and especially in his last game as a Cowboys defensive coordinator. You will remember that game. He got trounced. Your last game, your sorry, your last game as a coordinator has no indictment over whether or not you're gonna be a good coach, a good head coach in the NFL. It has nothing to do with it. What has to do with it is, do you get these guys ready to play on Sundays, and are you getting the most out of them? And I truly do believe that that's what Aaron Glenn is. He's going to be a leader, and he's going to get the best out of his players, and he's going to make sure the players that they bring in belong to be here. Because as I mentioned earlier, he can spot a fake. He said he'll let you know right away when someone's a fake, and when you're not putting maximum effort on the field, then you're a traitor to us, and we're going to trade you and get you the hell out of here. That's something that the Jets absolutely need. That's something this team is lacking by a large magnitude. There's so much of a lack of effort on what this defense was last year. So much of a lack of effort. It's a big reason why they went from top 5 in the NFL to just an abysmal, poor tackling, lack of communication, just the shit show that was this defensive team. This guy brought Detroit's defense from 32nd rank in the NFL to 7th with nothing. He had nothing on the defense side of the ball. It was stripped down to nuts and bolts, and he brought this thing back to number 7th, even after getting it stripped down to bolts again because of the injury bug that Detroit Lions had to face. This guy is going to get the best out of these players. Sauce Gardner will be a different player in 2025. He will be a better player. he'll be put in different positions that he's not been put in under Saleh. He will likely, and I don't know 100% what Aaron Glenn's going to do, obviously, but Sauce Gardner will be put in positions where when it's a critical down, you are covering the other team's number one guy in certain situations. We're not going to put you on their fourth receiver just because he lines up on that side of the ball. We're going to have you find. I'll refer to the Denver game. We're going to have you find Cortland Sutton on fourth down or on third down, whatever it was, and make sure that that guy does not get the ball because that's the one guy that we don't want getting the football in this situation and being left wide open in the back of the end zone for a lob touchdown by Bo Nix, the only touchdown in that game in a game that we lost 10-9. He is going to have this defense ready to play. He's going to have, we're going to go back to exotic game plans where it's man coverage on the outside and we're going to bring pressure. We're going to make you make a mistake instead of the quarterback just making a mistake every so often that leads to an interception. This team has lacked the ability to make turnovers. He's going to emphasize to his general manager and his front office that safety is a position in the NFL. It is not one you just bring whoever the hell you want. And because you have good players, corner and linebacker and defensive line, it's all going to work out. Yes, obviously you can't put an all pro at every level, every level of defense. But you do need somebody back there who strikes fear in this team. This team has not drafted a safety in the first couple of rounds since Ashton Davis was a third round pick, and I think that was a reach. Ashton Davis turned out to be a pretty solid player. I mean, I'll take him as a special teams guy in situational safety, but when you pick a guy in the third round that plays safety, you're hoping that he's kind of the way I see the draft is first and second round. These guys need to be starters. Third round should be a starter, but should definitely contribute on special teams to be a starter down in year two. Fourth through sixth rounds, you know, you'd like to find a diamond in the rough. Most likely special teamers that trend into starting roles by year two, year three, and then seventh round and beyond is really just shooting darts at a board and hoping you find talent somehow. The Jets have done that in the first two rounds. They've done a pretty good job there. Outside of Joe Douglas's first two picks in his career, as in the first couple of rounds, Zach Wilson and Mekhi Becton. Other way around, Becton then Zach Wilson. Outside of those, Douglas did a pretty decent job in the first two rounds. It's the middle rounds that were really just a problem for him, and even did a good job at undrafted free agency in some of these cases. But it was those middle rounds, just these swing and misses. Drafted plenty of offensive linemen, Max Mitchell, Carter Warren. List goes kind of on who he's drafted on the offensive side of the offensive line, and none of these guys really ever turned into anything, and that's very alarming for a guy that was supposed to come in here and be a guy that would develop offensive lines. I think it all comes down to really just and what's going to be the biggest, the first big test for Aaron Glenn is going to be who's your staff, who you're bringing in, who's going to be your offensive coordinator mainly. I know Steve Wilkes has been reported out there that he's going to be the defense coordinator, and got my little ticker here that I completely forgot 30 minutes in that we have this thing, but in a nutshell, Aaron Glenn's press conference slated for Monday at 1:00 p.m. I will be tuned into that, as many Jet fans should be. I feel like the Jet fans who, kind of ripped this guy and ripped the hire haven't heard this guy speak, and it's plainly obvious. If you haven't, please just tune into the Pivot podcast. And you know what? For lack of a better word here, I mean, just listen to it and root for him. Because at the end of the day, if you're not rooting for this guy to succeed, then get the hell out of this fan base. Seriously. What in the hell are you doing here? You want to be right? Is being right more important than this team doing good? Because if that's the case, go root for somebody else. Go somewhere else, please. We don't want you here if that's the case. We don't want your negativity. I'm negative, sure. I get negative when this team is doing poorly, but I'm not going to sit here and shit on a hire. You know what? Well, I'll revert back to that one. I will shit on a hire if it's absolutely asinine, like the Adam Gase hire. That was one that I was all over shitting on. That one, That I still wanted to be successful? Of course. I mean, that was no d I I definitely wanted to be successful. I just saw the writing on the wall with that one. It just didn't seem like the right hire from day one, and every Jet fan and multiple people could tell you that, and, hindsight, whatever, will tell you it was awful. 2-14 season, enough is enough. But when you have a situation like Aaron Glenn, like Todd Bowles, like Rex Ryan, like Herm Edwards, like a lot of these hires that we've had in the past, Eric Mangini, when you have all these situations of a coordinator coming in that has not been a head coach before, there's a major unknown of what that guy's going to be as a head coach. And that's what you got to root for. Is you got to root for the unknown. Is this guy going to be able to build a staff? We don't know. But some of the names being floated out there are pretty interesting. Nick Caley from the Rams, anybody off Sean McVay's tree is somebody that's very intriguing. I hope he comes. The fact that Tampa Bay's offensive coordinator just opened up is a little alarming to me. I think that's a situation that immediately becomes one of the top landing spots for someone who wants to be an offensive coordinator. Um, Considering the fact that the last two guys to hold that job are now head coaches in the NFL. I think that's alarming to me a little bit. Could be a situation for Clint Kubiak too. That's an interesting name that's being floated out there. We all know his father was a very successful head coach. Um, you know, it's in his bloodline. It's He had a great season last year calling plays for the Saints offense. Could that be a hire that the Jets go out there and make? The names on special teams. Um, Mike Westhoff got his book right there. I know he retired last year for health conditions. Um, hopefully all those things got resolved. And if he wants to be on board, would love to have Mike here. I mean, he was an absolutely outstanding head coach, and I met him in person at a book signing that he did. And in the 10 minutes I spoke with him, he's an outstanding human being. Would love to have him here. Would love to have somebody who worked under great coaching come here. Worked under Shula. I mean, and he's been in the league for decades. And all he's done is put successful special teams units out there on the field. He would be a massive upgrade over Brant Boyer. And obviously, like I don't know that the full time role is for him, but maybe he comes in here and brings a guy like Ben Kotswiko with him, who was there with Denver. And I think he also had a short stint, maybe a year or two, with the Jets earlier on in his career. I think shortly after Westhoff left to go to the Saints. But it would be very enticing for you know him to come here and as an advisory role for special teams. Sure, because that unit does need to be fixed. The Jets special teams unit does need a massive upgrade. Xavier Gibson just being shoot in as your primary kick special teams punt returner just because of one major big play when let's be real, I mean it was scary when that ball was in the air on punts. I was terrified of what could possibly happen anytime he was back there, and it wasn't a major problem for him, but it turned out to be a problem in some of these games where they just need to get better. And I think bringing in top tier coaching when you have a first time head coach is a major step in the right direction. Steve Wilkes coming in as defense coordinator. Um, I don't know if it's official or anything. I know that's the name that's just out there. It's like it's said so much that it almost seems like it's destined to happen. But I don't know that anything is official at this point. I think we'll find out some more details on Monday, hopefully. But Steve Wilkes coming in as defense coordinator. I know he didn't have a great final season with the Saints. Not Saints. 49ers. That year that they made the Super Bowl and they lost it, whatever. That was the year that they lost in overtime to the Chiefs. Again, I know Steve Wilkes is, you know, not the greatest defense coordinator from what we've seen over the last like few years, but the guy was a former head coach, so he's got that acumen in him. So you would like to think that be able to get something out of that. I like that. I do like that hire. I like the forwardness to understand that you are a first time head coach and you need to bring in coordinators around you that could relay your message, one, and two, relay your message in a way that a head coach would want to relay those messages. Mike Westhoff, never a head coach, but it definitely has the ability to be a head coach in the NFL. How great he's been as a special teams coordinator, um, pretty much speaks volumes to what he could be as a coach if that was something he was truly giving out. And I know he interviewed with the Jets a few times. I think he interviewed with the Jets during the I don't know if it was the Rex Ryan cycle or the Eric Mangini. It was one or the other. I'm pretty sure it was the Rex Ryan cycle, but nonetheless, um, the names floating out there are pretty enticing. Um, but again, we're rooting for a guy. You should be rooting for a guy that had an outstanding career with us and, you know, was there through the dark times and turned it around. That's what we're asking guys like Garrett Wilson to do. That's what we're asking guys like Sauce Gardner to do, Jermaine Johnson, Brees Hall. The list goes on. These top guys that we drafted, Will McDonald, um, Olu Fashanu. We're asking these guys, and we want these guys to do exactly what Aaron Glenn did for us under Parcells, was take this team from the darkness and back into success to the AFC Championship game. A 1-15 season, and then 3 years later, was it 3 years later or 4 years later? I forget exactly. But short period of time, they were in the AFC Championship game. Best season that the Jets have had in a very, very long time. Still to this day. I don't know. They had definitely not capped that number of wins in a season since then. We're asking this guy, we want this guy to do that, but there are some in the fan base that just seem like they'd rather be right. And to you guys, go. Please go somewhere else. We don't want people that just want to be right because for the sake of being right. This guy's if you're not rooting for this guy, you're basically a casual. I mean, let's be real. If you're not rooting for a former player to come in here and be a good coach for us, go take a walk. Seriously, I don't know what to tell you. Um, all this being said, here, Jets find themselves in a situation where they're down to. It seems like a final three for the GM spot, but it also does seem like they've kind of narrowed it down to just two. But the three names out there, obviously, Lance Newmark, who came in with Aaron Glenn on the day of his day after his hiring or day before his hiring. They were both on site the same day. I don't think Newmark is the guy that this team wants for the sheer fact of they brought him in with Aaron Glenn, I think, with a like preconceived notion of these guys work together in Detroit, and it's probably a good idea to pair people that know each other, um, so that you get a good unity at the top is really what the Jets were trying to do there with Newmark. It doesn't seem like that's the direction they're going to go because it sounds like writing's on the wall. The day after he was there, they bring in two more guys to interview. It sounds like just spitting this idea out there that Aaron Glenn was in the building, said, you know, Newmark is a good guy, but here's a couple other guys that maybe we can talk to if you haven't talked to them already. Which the Jets did interview both these guys earlier in the cycle through the virtual interview process thing. So or maybe they just said, here's the list of people we got. Any of these guys pique your interest, we'll bring them in so you can interview them as well. And both came in yesterday. Trey Brown, who is a senior personnel executive for the Bengals. So you look at what the Bengals have done there, drafted very, very well over the last few years. Um, would be nice if they got to better starts in the regular season because that's been a major downfall for them, but that's not him. He's in their personnel department. And then Darren Moogie, who I was not familiar with before this whole thing started, but he's an assistant GM for the Denver Broncos. The intrigue there is obviously his relationship to Sean Payton. Does Sean Payton have something to do with this, job reference? Could have something to do with it. If you ask me today who I think the hire will be, I think it's going to end up being Moogie, which again, I go back to what I mentioned earlier. I was huge on the hiring cycle of getting somebody experienced to do this thing. when one of the first interviews out there was Thomas Dimitrov from the Atlanta Falcons, retired or not retired, but I don't know what he's doing. He's not a GM right now. I was very intrigued. Thought they were starting that direction of like, all right, we definitely want someone experienced. Ron Rivera being a head coach candidate, although I didn't really want him out there. But I was very intrigued by the fact that they were already starting the interview process with people with experience. So the fact that here we are and we're going to go with two first timers again, that's the part that I have a little bit of skepticism to. But at some point, it's got to work, right? I mean, it's only failed so many times. At some point, you throw a dart at the board and it hits bullseye. I mean, even with your eyes closed, every so often it does work. And maybe this is the time. I hope so. Bringing in a former player and having him kind of run the show, which is something different than the Jets have ever done. I don't know the Jets ever really had a situation besides the Parcells year where the head coach was really your focal point. I think that's where you find this whole situation. I think the Jets tried it with the GM, head coach reports to the GM, and GM reports to the owner. I think they tried that with they did try it with the Salah and Joe Douglas situation. I don't think there's any true way to do it. Every team has a different way of doing it, but I think the way the Jets are going about it this time around is they're bringing in a guy in Aaron Glenn who has had experience in the scouting department. Yeah, I know he wasn't a GM, wasn't an assistant GM, wasn't a personnel, whatever. He wasn't any of that crap. Um, but he knows scouting enough, a little bit, having done it. He knows what he's looking for in players. He knows when someone's real or fake, as he's referenced. So it really does seem like this is going to be a situation where really this is Aaron Glenn's show. This is his show. He's the guy at the top. He's going to be the guy making the calls. GM will be there and will design his scouting department, will design his, you know, director of personnel, all that stuff. He will design that part of the building. But Aaron Glenn will be that guy at the top. And the GM, I don't know if it's gonna be a reporting thing where the GM will report to him. I don't think that matters as much as some people like to make it seem like it does. I don't think it really friggin' matters. Because at the end of the day, everyone's gotta be aligned. You got your head coach, you got your GM, you got your owner. Really, in any key situation, all three really need to be aligned. Obviously, your owner's your top honcho, but all three really needs to be aligned. Because if all three are not aligned, then that's where things get shaky, and that's where you're in a situation like the Jets have been in so many times, where every 3 years you're doing this whole friggin' thing all over again. Every 3 to 4 years, um, on average. Um, let's get it right. Let's get it right this time. I like the idea of Aaron Glenn, who has a lot of respect around the league, a lot of respect, rightfully so. Worked his way up from nothing to back to the top as a head coach in the NFL. Has a lot of respect for what he's done with that. Um, Again, if you haven't listened to the Pivot podcast and his interview on that show, I'll put that in my comments here in a moment. Um, it was a great watch, great listen, all the above. Um, but I think he's going to be there. He's going to be the focal point of the organization, and then the GM will be somebody he wants to work with, somebody that's going to basically take his opinion and try and replicate that into we're getting these players, we're bringing in these talents, and what's going to happen? I think Aaron Glenn's going to get the best out of those players as he's done every step along the way. He's been around great coaches, worked under great defenses, and you know now he has a chance with talented roster. We all said this going into the season. My biggest concern with this roster, with this team, was not its roster; it was with its coaching. You bring in a leader of men, someone who's done it as a player, understands what every single one of these players is going through right now, understands what Garrett Wilson is going through right now, understands Garrett Wilson hates losing, understands Sauce Gardner hates losing and not having the ability to have anything to do about it because all you have to do to eliminate Sauce Gardner is not throw the ball his way, especially when you can game plan around putting any receiver on him just for the sake of keeping him occupied. Aaron Glenn's gonna have him traveling. Not every play, but in enough situations, he's gonna have Sauce Gardner covering the other team's best receiver, similar to what Revis did all those years. And maybe that results in more opportunities, and maybe that will result in more interceptions. Because it's, you look at it, maybe a game like going up against Justin Jefferson, where he's locked Justin Jefferson down a couple times in his career. Still got to throw the ball to him at some point. Can't not throw the ball to your best receiver all game long. That's what made Reeves great. He was always on the number one guy. He traveled all game long with that guy. Is that what I think is going to happen with Sauce? I don't know. I don't think so. NFL's a little different now. Teams know how to game plan around getting their primary guy off the number one guy. But Aaron Glenn's going to do whatever he can to get the best out of Sauce, get the best out of everybody. And something that Solid did a good job too. But where I think this differentiates is I really truly do believe that Aaron Glenn is going to have his hands on the offense as well, because this is his team. It's going to be his team. The writing is on the wall of what this team is going for. They are going for their head coach to be the focal point of what this organization is going to be. He's going to be the face of the organization. He has to be. We don't have a quarterback. All you have is a head coach. A head coach that this fan base should support and I support. And a majority of the fan base does. I'm just tired of seeing the people out there that just shitting on this guy just for the sake of how he got here. He he got here as a defensive coach, yeah, but have you paid attention to his career at all? Yeah, he was a first round pick, obviously, whatever. That was probably the only thing given to him was his status as a drafted player, but he wasn't given the opportunity with Parcells. Parcells sat him down and said, "You have a price tag on your head. Someone gives it to me, you're gone." And that's true. That's the way it should be in the NFL, and he respects that. He even said it again. Listen to the pivot. But nonetheless, I don't know how you can't be excited. Again, former player making a return and wants to bring back those glory days. I cannot wait till Monday when the Jets have the press conference. I'm super excited for it. I want to hear what this guy has to say. I've heard enough on his interview on the pivot, and I've taken some time over the last few weeks, kind of understood this was eventually gonna be the case. All signs were pointing in this direction. I kind of figured it would come down to the Jets or the Saints for him. Was really my kind of thought process there. I never really took it realistic with him going to Denver, not Denver. I mean, Jacksonville. Never really viewed that as a realistic landing spot. I guess he played there for a year, but whatever. Never really saw that as a realistic spot for him. But I'm so happy he's here because out of the names left, especially the names left that the Jets had interviewed, he was the number one guy. So I took a lot of time to look at some of his past press conferences with Detroit, and tell you what, this guy stands on the podium and he's a media whiz. I mean, people respect this guy, respect the hell out of him, and that's what the Jets need. They need a little bit of respect. There's not enough respect for this franchise as there should be. I know it's been 14 years of misery and wrong decisions and so on and so forth. But at some point, you got to get it right, and I have all the faith in the world that this will be it. I really do hope so. And if not, we're sitting here in 3 years talking about the next head coaching cycle. But I hope so. I hope it's not the case, as many Jet fans should. It's not about being right. It's about getting it right. And hopefully the Jets got it right this time. Thank you for listening. Anybody out there, appreciate you joining the show. If you haven't already, would really appreciate it if you hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and most importantly, let's go Jets and let's go Aaron Glenn.